Something unusual is happening in Mason, Ohio. Before Alex Eala has even played her first match at the Cincinnati Open, the excitement is already building. Filipino flags are appearing around the tournament grounds, fans are making plans, tickets are being discussed, and the question spreading through the tennis community is simple. How big is the Alex Eala phenomenon about to become in Cincinnati? Because this is no longer the same Alex Eala who arrived in Washington as an unseeded player hopping to make a deep run. This is a champion. A player who has already beaten some of the biggest names in women's tennis. A player who has just experienced the most important weeks of her young career. And now Cincinnati is next. Just days ago, Eala was in Toronto, where thousands of Filipino supporters transformed the Canadian Open into something that looked more like a home tournament. The chants, the flags, the signs, the sheer volume of support. It was unlike anything Eala had experienced before. And now that same energy is following her south into Ohio. But Cincinnati presents a completely different challenge. This isn't a tournament where Eala can quietly surprise everyone. She's now one of the players people are coming to watch. And that changes everything. Think about how quickly this has happened. At the beginning of this breakthrough period, Eala was still trying to establish herself on the WTA Tour. Then came Wimbledon. She reached the second week of a Grand Slam and produced one of the biggest wins of her career against Iga Swiatek. Suddenly, the tennis world knew her name. Then came Washington. And that was even bigger. Eala fought through a brutal draw, survived difficult moments, defeated Naomi Osaka, and eventually faced Jessica Pegula in the final. She lost the opening set. Rain interrupted the championship match. And instead of falling apart, Eala came back and completely changed the match. She won the second set. Then she finished the third set with a stunning 6-0. That wasn't simply a tournament victory. It was history. Eala became the first Filipina to win a WTA Tour-level singles title. And suddenly, everything around her changed. The expectations changed. The attention changed. And most importantly, the way tournaments viewed her changed. That is why her arrival in Cincinnati feels different. The tournament already has an enormous collection of stars. Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff, Iga Swiatek, Naomi Osaka. These are players who have spent years dominating headlines. But Eala is now entering the same conversation. And Cincinnati itself has already recognized the extraordinary support surrounding her. The tournament has highlighted Eala's passionate Filipino supporters alongside other major fan groups. That detail matters. Because tournaments don't usually have to think about a player's fan base before that player even steps onto the court. But with Eala, the crowd has become part of the story. Washington showed it. Toronto confirmed it. And Cincinnati is about to test it again. Toronto may have been the clearest evidence yet. Eala arrived in Canada immediately after winning Washington. She was exhausted. She had played match after match. But Filipino fans didn't care about the fatigue. They showed up. Thousands packed the stadium. The atmosphere became so intense that even Eala's opponents commented on it. Belinda Bencic, who eventually ended Eala's 7-match winning streak, acknowledged that most of the crowd was supporting the Filipina. And Eala herself admitted that the experience was difficult to describe. She talked about being just a small part of a much larger Filipino community. That might be the most important part of this entire phenomenon. Because Eala isn't simply creating fans. She's creating representation. For many Filipinos, watching her compete at the highest level means seeing someone who looks like them, speaks for them, and carries their flag into some of the biggest arenas in tennis. And that emotional connection doesn't disappear because she loses a match. In fact, Toronto proved the opposite. Eala lost to Bencic. The scoreboard was brutal. But the crowd still applauded her. They still waved the flags. They still chanted her name. That's what separates a temporary tennis trend from something much bigger. But here's where Cincinnati becomes fascinating. Because Eala can no longer rely on being overlooked. Opponents know her now. Coaches know her patterns. Analysts are studying her game. And every player who steps across the net knows that beating Alex Eala is no longer considered a bonus victory. It's a major scalp. That means Cincinnati will test something completely different. Not just Eala's forehand. Not just her backhand. Not just her serve or return. It will test her ability to handle expectation. A year ago, Eala could walk onto a court with almost nothing to lose. Now, people expect her to win. And that's one of the hardest transitions in professional sport. The pressure of being the underdog is very different from the pressure of being the player everyone is watching. But if Eala has learned one thing from Toronto, it's that she isn't walking into Cincinnati alone. Somewhere in that crowd, there will be Philippine flags. There will be fans shouting her name. There will be people who traveled specifically because she is playing. And there will be millions watching from the Philippines and around the world. For Eala, that support can be powerful. But she also understands that it comes with responsibility. She has spoken openly about how surreal the attention has become. One moment she's simply trying to win a tennis match. The next she's being discussed as a symbol of Filipino pride. That is a huge weight for anyone, let alone a young player still developing her career. And yet she continues to embrace it. Not because she believes she has to win every match, but because she understands what her journey means to people. And that's why the excitement around Cincinnati isn't really about one match. It's about what comes next. Eala has already made history. She has already won her first WTA title. She has already reached the second week of a Grand Slam. She has already beaten some of the best players in the world. Now she has to prove that this isn't a temporary peak. Can she keep climbing? Can she defeat another top player? Can she make another deep run? Can she carry this momentum toward the US Open? Those questions are still unanswered. And that's exactly what makes Cincinnati so exciting. Because the tennis world has finally stopped asking whether Alex Eala belongs. Now they're asking how far she can go. And as the gates open in Cincinnati, the flags rise and the crowd begins to gather, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. Alex Eala is no longer arriving as a surprise. She's arriving as a champion. And the entire tennis world is watching to see what she does next. But here's where the Cincinnati story gets really interesting. The biggest challenge facing Alex Eala may not be the player waiting across the net. It may be everything that has happened before she even walks onto the court. A few weeks ago, Eala was chasing opportunities. Now opportunities are chasing her. She is no longer the unknown player hopping for attention. She is the champion people are buying tickets to see. And that creates an entirely different kind of pressure. Because when you're an underdog, losing can be explained. When you're a rising star, losing can be part of the journey. But when you've just won a WTA title and produced one of the most remarkable runs of the season, suddenly everyone wants to know. What's next? Look at what Eala has done recently. She reached the second week at Wimbledon. She defeated Iga Swiatek. She won her first WTA title in Washington. She defeated Naomi Osaka. She beat Jessica Pegula in a final. Then she went to Toronto and extended her winning streak to 7 matches before finally running into Olympic champion Belinda Bencic. That's an extraordinary sequence. But there's a hidden danger. Every great result raises expectations for the next one. And Eala knows that. After Toronto, she didn't pretend she was invincible. She admitted that the schedule had taken a toll. 8 matches in roughly 12 days had pushed her physically and mentally. So she took time away from tennis. She rested. She traveled. She got the haircut she had joked about needing. She fixed her nails. And perhaps most importantly, she allowed herself to breathe. That break could be extremely important in Cincinnati. Because the player arriving in Ohio isn't supposed to be the same exhausted player who walked off the court in Toronto. She's supposed to be refreshed. And that's exactly what makes her next match so fascinating. There's another major difference. Before Washington, opponents could underestimate her. That option doesn't really exist anymore. Coaches have watched the matches. Players have seen the results. They know she can absorb pressure. They know she can change direction quickly. They know her left-handed game can create uncomfortable angles. And they know she doesn't panic easily when matches become complicated. That's what happens when an underdog becomes a champion. The target gets bigger. Every opponent now wants the victory over Eala because it means something. Beating her is no longer simply beating a young player. It's beating the woman who just shocked the tennis establishment. And that's exactly why Cincinnati could reveal how real this rise actually is. Her ranking is another sign of how quickly everything has changed. Just a relatively short time ago, Eala was outside the world's top 100. Now she's around the top 20. And in Cincinnati, she enters as a seeded player. That alone is a remarkable transformation. But here's the important part. Her ranking may actually be behind her level. Rankings are built from points accumulated over time. They don't instantly reflect a player's current confidence. They don't measure the atmosphere surrounding them. And they certainly don't measure how difficult it has suddenly become for opponents to deal with them. Eala's ranking says she's one of the rising players. Her recent results suggest something much bigger. She can beat elite players right now. And that distinction matters. If Toronto taught us anything, it's that Eala can turn a tennis court into an emotional event. The Filipino supporters didn't simply watch her. They created an atmosphere. Flags everywhere. Chants throughout matches. Fans staying even after difficult losses. And Eala noticed it. She spoke about how difficult it was to describe the feeling of playing in front of so many Filipinos. She called herself a small part of a much larger community. That humility is important. Because she understands that the attention isn't only about her. It's about what she represents. And now Cincinnati gets to experience that phenomenon. The Filipino community around Ohio may not be as large as Toronto's, but the passion is already there. And once Eala steps onto the court, that support can become incredibly loud. This is the part that should not be forgotten. Crowds can create energy. They can create momentum. They can make a player feel at home. But they can't hit the ball. They can't serve at 120 miles per hour. They can't save break points. Eventually, Eala has to do the hardest thing herself. Play tennis. And Cincinnati's draw will demand her best. The tournament features some of the most dangerous players in the world. There are Grand Slam champions. Former world number ones. Top 5 players. Young stars who are already established. There is almost nowhere to hide. If Eala wants another deep run, she'll have to earn it. And perhaps that's exactly what she wants. Because she has repeatedly said that she isn't defining success simply by reaching a particular round. She wants to execute her game. She wants to play at the level she expects from herself. That's a mature approach for a player who is still only 21. So maybe Cincinnati isn't really about proving that Alex Eala is talented. Nobody is debating that anymore. The bigger question is whether she can turn this incredible momentum into consistency. One tournament can be a breakthrough. 2 tournaments can be a run. But repeated performances against elite opposition. That's how careers are built. That's how players become stars. And that's what Eala is trying to do now. Washington gave her the trophy. Toronto gave her an unforgettable connection with Filipino fans. Cincinnati gives her another opportunity to prove that she belongs among the sport's elite. And then comes the US Open. The biggest stage yet. There's something else that makes this moment different. Eala is no longer playing only for herself. Not literally. She still has her own goals. Her own team. Her own career. But she understands that millions of people are now emotionally invested in what happens to her. That's powerful. And it can also be heavy. Eala has described the attention as both exciting and overwhelming. That's probably the most honest way to describe it. The spotlight can open doors. It can create opportunities. It can inspire an entire generation. But it also means every mistake gets noticed. Every loss becomes a headline. Every victory creates an even bigger expectation. Cincinnati will test whether Eala can live comfortably inside that spotlight. Because the spotlight isn't going away. If anything, it's getting brighter. And now, with the tournament underway, there is only one thing left to discover. Can the champion from Washington produce another statement in Cincinnati? Can the Filipina star turn her incredible summer into an even bigger hardcourt run? Or will the pressure finally catch up with her? Whatever happens, the story has already changed. Alex Eala isn't asking tennis to notice her anymore. Tennis is watching her.